So this morning, I want to share with you a quote from Anthony DeMello from Walking on Water. One day God got tired of people. They were always pestering him, asking him for things. So he said, I'm going to wait and hide for a while. So he gathered all of his advisors and said, where should I hide? Where's the best place for me to hide? Some said, hide on the highest mountain peak on earth. Others said, no, hide at the bottom of the sea. They'll never find you there. Others, hide on the other side of the moon. That's the best place. How are they to find you there? Then he turned to his most intelligent advisor and asked him, where do you advise me to hide? This angel smiled and said, go hide yourself in the human heart. That's the only place they will never go. There's a thought, huh? Anthony DeMello was a 20th century theologian. There was a couple that had two little naughty boys. They were 8 and 10. And if something around their neighborhood was done that was bad, you could guarantee that the finger was pointing at them, always. Their mother was so frustrated, she didn't know what to do, so she went to a pastor in the area, in the neighborhood, that was known to be extremely stern. So she was going to take each of them one at a time to see the pastor. So the first one, he was the youngest, the 8-year-old, and the pastor took him into his study, and he was in an extremely stern mood. And so he lets the kid know, he's thinking, I'll be authoritarian here, and maybe he'll get the point. Maybe I'll scare him into being good. So he sits the kid down, talks to him for a few minutes, finally points his finger at him in a real mean voice and says, where is God? The little boy couldn't answer. He didn't know what he was talking about. So he does it again. The pastor points his finger at him in a real stern, mean voice, says, where is God? Kid just sits there, and finally the pastor does it again. And the little boy at that point is so scared, he just gets up and runs out and runs all the way home and finds his brother. He says, oh, listen, you're not going to believe this. God is missing, and they think we took him. But you never know. I have seen some pretty naughty boys and girls, I might add, boys and girls. The title of my talk today is Where to Find God. It's a pretty big topic, I know, and if you think, oh no, she's going to talk for an hour, you might be wanting to get up and leave, but no, don't. You may find a glimmer of something here and there that might be instructive for you. Last week, Tammy Breidenbeck gave a really great talk about the 5 principles, the Unity 5 principles, and what they are. There are five principles that make it easy for living. You can pretty much take them and go with it and just review that every day and answer just about all your questions with those 5 principles. Where they came from is that all of Myrtle and Charles Fillmore's teachings became quite complex and broad. There was just a multitude of books, articles to go through, and so their granddaughter, Connie Fillmore, at one point took all of those teachings, all of them, and she condensed them down into these 5 principles. Isn't that cool? Isn't that cool? Now, this is even a little bit complex. We're going to give you what Tammy gave you last week, where it's real simple, that God is everywhere, always present. Human beings are innately good. We're connected to God. Our thoughts are creative. Prayer and meditation connect and align us to our own spiritual nature within God. And it's not enough to know these truths. You must live them. For instance, you can talk all day long about principles, ethics, morality, anything you want to talk about. You can talk about it all day long. You know that, right? But you got to live it. That fifth principle is really important. You have got to live it. Then she presented this, and she has a handout on the back table too. This is what we give the youth sometimes so that they'll remember these 5 principles. Now remember, this is all boiled down from multitudes of books and writings that the Fillmores had. God is, I am, I think it, I pray it, I live it. Now is that simple? That's pretty simple, huh? So today, I'm taking on a pretty big subject, and that is what God is. So I'm going to give you first one of God's most important attributes, and that is God is love. God is love. If it's not love, it's not of God, but it's of our own humanness, our ego. And that's the bottom line. If you're ever trying to make a decision about something and you're wondering what God's path would be, or the right path for you, and your intention is to follow God, then look for the path of love. It may not be the easiest path, but that's what you should follow. There's an international tourist who came upon a group of people listening to an orator in the center square of a small European town. And the speaker spoke from a makeshift podium, and it was extremely loud. And like the earlier pastor that I talked about, he seemed angry, stern, and demanding. So this visitor, who couldn't understand the language that he was hearing from the man up on the podium, he couldn't speak the language. He was very curious about what the man was talking about. So he asked a man next to him what he was ranting on and on about, what the subject was. The man pointed to a church spire in the distance and said, "See that church steeple? The fellow who is speaking in the square is the pastor of that church. And right now, he's talking about the love of God." I know right now is a good time for us to think about that, isn't it? When there's been so much in the airways, the waves this year, and so many things that are being thrown out there. Some are loud. Some are even spoken in a mean voice. Some are condescending or other. It's hard to tell truth or God from something else, isn't it? And that's where we get to decide, and that's where we need to find out How does God speak to me? Where does that voice come from? When the voices out there are so loud and ugly, how can I find God in this? How can I find truth in this? Because truth is of God. And it's like everything out in the world these days, isn't it? If you look at it closely, you'll see that everything seems to have an intention behind it. And if the intention is anything other than God or good, then we shouldn't follow it. You know how that looks. There's an advertisement for, the newest whatever, the newest hair product, or the newest whatever that's going to help you claim your youthful body or your whatever. And we know that the true intention behind it, the true intention, when you get to the heart of the matter, when you get to the real heart of the matter, there is really no heart of the matter at all, is there? The intention is, it's a marketing ploy. That was a marketing ploy, wasn't it? Is what that was. So I think the goal for us is to be able to discern in our daily lives what is the true voice of God and what is just noise. What's noise? Like the young man that was listening to the telegraph. Come in for your interview. How do we learn to listen for the voice of God? How do we find that? How do we find that with all the babble out there? As a matter of fact, Charles Fillmore said that. He said, with all the babble, and we know that, with all the different denominations, with all the different thoughts, with all the different needs from the rest of the world that's trying to convince you of something. Charles Fillmore said, and I love this, with all that babble out there about God and what's right and what Jesus said, he said, you know what? I think I'm just going to go to headquarters. And I'm going to find out for myself what God says. And if I can't be still, if I can't go into the silence and I can't find God there, then maybe at that point I get to decide God's a fraud then. But until I have finally found for myself, and I don't want anybody else telling me what it is, until I have found that voice myself in the silence, I'm not going to listen to all this other babble. I'm just not going to listen to it. The way is through the heart. In the early days of Christianity, the followers of Jesus referred to their faith as the way. And this term emphasizes that Christianity was initially seen not as a religion, but as a path, a way of living in accordance with the teachings of Jesus. And one of the main teachings of Jesus was that the kingdom is within. The kingdom is within. God's within you. You're the light. You can do what I do, he said. But so often we ignore that. The kingdom is within. How do I find that? How do I find that? Sometimes you can put your hand over your heart. If someone asks you, who are you? You'll automatically put your hand over your heart, won't you? This is who I am. I am the one that was sent by the one power and the one presence that we call God, to be here at this time and to share with you. We follow at Unity, we follow the path of Jesus. We follow the words and not the doctrine. And that means that we follow the words that Jesus spoke, but we don't follow the doctrine and dogma that was created after his life. After he died, he told us that the kingdom is within us. And what we're looking for here is to develop a Christ consciousness, and you can call it, if that word doesn't work for you, you can call it something else. You can call it higher consciousness. You can call it anything you like. In our discussion group this morning, we were talking about when we're out of kilter, a bit disturbed. Everything around us has caused us to have some issues. We've got a little disturbance going on around us when what we really want is peace. And it may even take us a while before we can see that. Before we may be listening to the loud voices around us. And we want to find peace. We want to find God. We want to find love. And the late Wayne Dyer said when he would need to, he would just think of reaching for a trolley strap. When he needed to find God, when we're distanced from God and we can't find God at the moment, he said he would just imagine himself reaching for the trolley strap, and there he would find his connection to the one power and the one presence that we call God. I've often said that I would use the mantra back to balance, back to balance, back to balance. And now listen, it can take a while because you get caught up in those loud voices. You get caught up in the world. And so it can take a while before you recognize that you are caught up in that. And you say, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Back to balance, back to balance, back to my God heart. But to find the Christ consciousness, we find it by a connection in the heart. They call it now heart consciousness. That we allow God, the light, to come in, whatever way that we choose to allow the light to come in through us. The Quakers call it finding the light, allowing the light to come in. Some call it the infinite way of life, light and life. Whatever way you can find in your moments when you feel separated from God, from peace, from love. That's how you know you're separated from God, is when you're not at peace. When you feel the world around you crashing in, you're not at peace and you want to be at peace. But you just can't find a way. Reach for that trolley strap to find God. Rumi said, I looked for God and I went to a temple. I didn't find him there. Then I went to a church. I didn't find him there either. So I went to a mosque and I didn't find him there. Then finally, I looked in my own heart and there he was. It's not that complicated if we'll just remember it. God is here, but it depends on us. Rabbi Krishna wrote, God has no other hands than ours. If the sick are to be healed, it's our hands, not God's, that will heal them. We know that, right? We allow God to work through us. We reach God easily. It's a local call. There are no tolls. There are no fees. Reaching God is as easy as taking a breath, finding the place of silence within, and allowing that connection to take place. God is here right now. And the people who are in this room, the people whose hands we're going to hold in a few minutes, God is here. We're in each an expression of the divine right here, the face of God. How do we sense God? A boy was flying a kite on a misty day. The kite was invisible in the fog. A passerby wondered what fun it could be flying a kite that could not be seen, to which the boy replied, I cannot see it, but I can feel it tugging. We're flying kites in the fog. Our encounters with the divine bring joy and fulfillment, just like our divine purpose. We feel something tugging us toward the Holy One, the holy place. The holiest place ever is right here. We may search the world over like some of these others have done, searching in the right temple, the right mountaintop, wherever. Jesus said the kingdom is within, so we find God in our hearts, a heart that's connected with love. This is our own spiritual heritage right here at Unity. We tell you every week, God is. I am. I think it. I pray it. I live it. We breathe, we center, we observe ourselves, our reactions. We reach for something higher. We're present and we practice it. In my life, God, in this community, God, in this world, God, in all that I do, in all that I am, God is. I feel God tugging at my heart right now, and I hope you do too. Thank you for your time.